Well, let's take a few minutes and talk about how do we make sure that the church is a sticky church, meaning it's a place where people actually are engaging and they're lasting and they're thriving and they're participating in the process of what the church is doing, both outwardly, but also growing in their own, what it means to be a follower, that they're growing as disciples of Jesus as well. Here's some important things to think through, especially in the world of a church plant. That people, when they become sticky in a church plant, for that church plant and for the church planter, it's everything. And it takes a lot of work. It's not like we have already existing programs and systems that are in place that naturally help people connect and build relationships. And so everything is fresh, everything is new. People come in the doors of the church with all kinds of questions. They don't know if you're legit. They don't know if you're a cult. They don't know if they can trust you. And so there's some practical things that you can begin to put into play that will actually help create a level of stickiness in the life of the church. So let's talk about some of those things. First of all, you need to have some kind of starting point experience where people come for the first time. You may call this a newcomers gathering. It may meet the pastors, but it's important to have a starting point that, hey, if you're new here, start here. And the biggest thing in helping people move forward and to make those connections, again, it comes back to the importance of clarity. Clear is everything right here. You don't want that next step to be too complex. I know, for instance, what complexity may look like is, hey, we're glad you're here. If you're new here, we'd love to invite you to come to the pastor's house. Or would you consider joining a small group? Or would you just jump in and begin to volunteer in children's ministry? Those steps oftentimes are just too big for the normal person to take a leap and to feel comfortable doing so. Now, you may have a few that, after week 2 that they're already serving, but that is the outlier. That is not the norm when it comes to people's participation and engagement in the local church. So figure out that onboarding ramp. The starting point, newcomers gathering, or even a meet the pastors type of experience are really, really helpful in that early phase to help people get engaged and know, hey, this is a place I can trust. I can trust that leadership team. I like this church. And what do you need to do at that? Find a time that works for you and key leaders in the life of your church. We operate right now a starting point class, and we just do it right after the Sunday services. We do it once or twice, or once a month, or maybe once every other month, based on kind of what's going on in our calendar. And we just keep it high level. Hey, this is a little bit of my story. You're going to see my story flow in the life of the church as well. Here's where we're going as a church. We'd love for you to be a part of it. Here's how you can get involved. Here's how you can get to know, be known, and know others, and just give them practical steps, and then actually have the opportunities for them maybe to engage and talk with those team leaders and say, hey, if you're interested in children's ministry, I'm going to encourage you to come over here and talk to our children's director. If you're interested in maybe volunteering, knowing more about how we onboard new people and maybe consider joining our guest services team. Hey, so-and-so over here, they actually lead our guest services team. I know they'd love to be able to answer any questions that you have. And so this is a time in which you can begin to pinpoint some of those key people and actually hand off opportunity to them and responsibility and see their leadership capacity raise in that process as well. One of the things, and it's just, maybe this is a Leeism, maybe it's a pet peeve of mine, but I would encourage you, don't go too simple on food. Presentation is everything. For instance, you don't have a meet the pastors gathering or a starting point gathering and throw a bunch of pizza in a box in the middle of the table and just expect that. This is the phase in which you're wanting to woo people and you're wanting people to like who you are. And so think about how could we do something that's a little above pizza. I'm not saying you need to go out and have a 5-course meal and bring in steaks and all that kind of stuff. But the presentation says a lot in the way that you say whether or not somebody is truly important to you and important to you as a church. And if you become flippant about those, you're kind of sending this unsaid message. Yeah, we really don't care much about you, but we're glad you're here. And so you want to elevate the care level in the way that you present food, whether or not it's a type of setting in which you're doing food. One of my favorite ones we did was when we had new members or people that were exploring membership. So they've come to the church for a while. They've attended a kind of a starting point. We did a dessert night at our house. And we actually, my admin would follow up with them and specifically say, hey, I want you to know, this is not a normal church event. You're being invited over to the pastor's house. It's not the type of thing you reserve a spot and then not show. And so we had to coach people through that, but we just sat down, we had good dessert, and we limited the number to what my living room could handle, which was around 12 people. And we just said, there's no agenda. What would you like to know about us, our family, the church? And that just built a high level of advocacy among the people in our church, and just mutual love for the leadership, for the church, and for one another that was priceless in the life of our church. And I get questions all the time. Was it uncomfortable inviting people to come to your church, your home, because now they know where you live and they can come and bother you whenever they want? And it's like, no, that never happened. And I think sometimes we can play those things out in ways that you go, that's just not reality. The next thing is you probably at some point need to look at what would it be to have a membership class, a church 101 class, where it's kind of the next level of involvement. And what does it mean to be a member in your church? So we just simply characterize it this: a member is somebody we can call upon. Whenever there's something going on, good or bad, where we just need help, we need reinforcements, a member is the person that we can call upon. Would you consider being that kind of person? And then we kind of put in what the basic requirements are, and we talk about, even from a legal standpoint, this is what members do in the life of our church, and this is what they don't do. And then you want to think, how do we actually onboard people to small groups or missional communities? How are we helping them move forward? Are we going to offer alpha classes or growth track? There's just all kinds of things. All of those are designed to help people begin to take initial steps in being known, getting known, and moving forward in their discipleship process. Here are some things you want to think about when it comes to doing those things, whether or not it's a newcomer starting point, meet the pastor type of experience, growth track. You want to make the time fun, informal, engaging, but informative. And so people need to come, be able to be themselves. You as a leader, you as a pastor need to be comfortable being yourself, but it needs to mean something. People need to have a level of clarity as to kind of, this is who we are, this is kind of where we're going as a church. Be flexible in your presentation style. You can't necessarily, you'll notice when people come, you'll have different groups of people with different experiences, and you want to be able to flex according to that kind of group, that culture of people that are walking in for that specific meeting. You can hit the basic high points, keep those the same, but your approach may need to be flexible. Hold the meetings at a convenient time for others, but also a convenient time for you and your own personal family. Sometimes we can push so hard and we just add things to the calendar. We don't realize the toll that they're actually taking on us personally in that process. And so hold the meetings in a way that they actually are at a convenient time. Promote them on Sundays on a regular basis. Have people actually register so it means something. And that way, if you can automate it, they get an automatic follow-up, whether or not it's a text or an email or a phone call, however works in your system. But just reminding them, hey, you signed up for this. We're expecting you. I can't wait to have you. Encourage your regular attenders to attend with their friends. So if they're inviting and investing somebody that's new to the church, and you're one, and tell them, hey, get them to the starting point and come sit through it again. Just figure out ways to break down those walls. Again, provide a variety of refreshments and lunch. It is really helpful if you can do childcare. That's one of the reasons why we do it directly after the Sunday experience, the weekend services, is we have childcare. Is easier to just ask people, hey, would you stay for 30 minutes? Or would you stay for an hour as we do this? This is a really important onboarding ramp. But the child care can become a hindrance to people actually attending those things. Have a plan for where you're going, and then always offer key next steps with the ability to actually take that initial step at those meetings. But here's some other things. So we talked about how churches, what they can do, especially in the church planting world, to become sticky. Let me talk about the flip side. What are the things that tend to get a church stuck and keep you from being able to move forward? And I'm going to just hit these real quickly. First of all, when the pastor is the primary caregiver, your church is going to get stuck because you only have so much energy. You only have so much capacity. So this is why it's so important early on, right off the bat, to be thinking about how are we raising up leaders? Who are we handing responsibility and authority to? Leaders aren't actually leading. If you have leaders in place, but they're not actually doing anything, if they're not actually reproducing things and people and actually discipling people, they're not leading, your church is going to get stuck. And so you got to figure out, how do we keep people moving forward? How do we keep our leaders leading? Are they being empowered? And so churches get stuck, point number 3, when people are unempowered. They're micromanaged, and as a result, nothing ever gets done, and they feel, well, you don't trust me, and so they just don't engage at the level that you need them to engage. And so be careful of overtly micromanaging and, as a result, unempowering people to do what God has actually wired them to do. Sometimes churches get stuck because you're just doing too much. Sometimes the one thing you need to do is just simplify and begin to assess all the programming and what are we doing as a church. Is that thing that we're investing so much time and volunteers and money in, is it actually making a difference? Are we moving the ball down the field? Are people coming to Christ? If not, kill it. Don't do it. Just don't get too much stuff on that everything else becomes mediocre as a result. Churches also get stuck when the pastor is fearful of what other people may say or what they may think. Hey, listen, part of leadership is learning to be okay with disappointing people. I oftentimes said years ago that, if 5% of the people in your congregation aren't upset with what you're doing, you're probably not doing your job as a leader. I think it's actually graduated now to, I'd say, 20%, because people are much more free with their opinions than ever before. And so, pastor, operate with courage. We don't operate by a spirit of fear or timidity, but we walk with love, we walk with self-control, and we walk with courage. The next things are, sometimes our systems are the reason why we get stuck. In some of the systems you want to constantly evaluate and assess are, what are we doing to develop leaders? Children's ministry, guest experience and follow-up, parking, believe it or not, the systems of parking. I was just, even this week that I'm recording this, was in a church parking lot that had to be the worst church parking lot I've ever experienced in my life. You couldn't get out of it. It was just, you had to drive here to here to here to here, all over the place to finally exit the parking lot. That can be a hindrance, and that can in itself could cause a church to get stuck. Sometimes it's the facility. I know in our church plant that we planted in Arizona, our facility, we just outgrew. We were running close to 1,300 people in a facility that was only 13,000 square feet. And it became really difficult to do children's ministry and other things just because there just wasn't room to put people. And I'm pretty sure we were probably breaking fire code when it came to how many kids we were putting into classrooms even at that point. And then lastly, group life. Group life matters. People need to get into community. Learning takes best in circles versus rows. And so we got to get people out of the row experience of Sunday mornings into circle experiences of doing life together. Sometimes it's just unfavorable cultural trends. Sometimes things are happening in your direct community you have no say over, and there's nothing you can do about it. I mentioned before, I had a friend that planted a church in an area outside of Detroit. In the first 6-7 years that he was there, the population of his town actually decreased around 25% in population. Nothing you can do about that. And so sometimes our churches get stuck just simply of what's going on right around us. Sometimes, too, the churches get stuck because, let's admit it, the culture of the church itself stinks. None of us like the way we would experience it. It's like if I were to pick a church, I probably wouldn't pick our church. If that's the truth, there's some hard things that probably need to change. Again, back to lack of courage. It could be the overall capacity of key leaders. As you grow, you have to change the way you play the game. You may need to go from golf to basketball, and sometimes those golf buddies aren't able to begin to play basketball, and so you want to think through that. And then lastly, character. When the character of the leadership team or the pastors in the church isn't in a godly, biblical manner, the church is most likely going to get stuck as well. And so those are some things to think about, operate around, be conscious of, have a healthy respect for. Don't fall into those traps. If you see some of those traps beginning to happen, push everything in order to move beyond that and get to health. And my prayer for you is that your church will continue to blossom and the foundation will be laid for years to come and generations to come to be touched and led to Christ.